growing up in the black church, a historic 156-year-old black church with a lot of leaders, very much in the what I call in the river of Dr. King and the civil rights leaders.
Yeah.
Who saw a vision and said, we've seen the promised land and we may not get there, he said, with you, but I've seen it and I know we need to be working towards it. So I feel like I just got in that river and just continue to learn how to swim through racial hatred, through racial violence, things like that.
Yeah.
And for the most part, come out not bitter and angry at the world.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out here with my friend, Keith Daniel. And yeah, this is a special edition. Exploring More is going to honor, with the help of my friend Martin Luther King, for Martin Luther King Day. And so just to introduce you, man, I thought you've got so many credentials and stuff. You've done more school than any brother I've known. Just all how many degrees you have now? From
Four.
Undergrad to grad? Four? Four.
Right.
Yeah. And it's doctor.
Yeah, man. I like to wear that every now and then when I have to.
Well, I'm going to use it because it helps elevate the profile of Exploring More podcast.
Yeah, man.
To bring in doctor. But Keith, we were just talking about off camera you had your 30th anniversary recently.
Yeah.
I think we met, I want to say probably 23 years ago.
I thought it was going back to 93, 94.
That's
maybe.
right after I got here, man. Right after I landed in Duketown.
Sure.
And so I think Ashley was born, and then Madison, your son, came.
Yeah, 98.
98. So you were, I think I knew you when you didn't have kids.
Yep, you did.
Just for a little while. And so Duke undergrad background, played high school football, played college football at Duke. My relationship with Duke University is the Athletes in Action representative there.
Yeah. That
kind of crossed our paths in the faith space, but really we started hooping together in not pickup ball. I don't want to nothing wrong with those scrubs. I'm talking about we had a closed game between a lot of former players, football, basketball players, were late 20s. And that's gone on for 30 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Special, man. Special time.
Injuries, hip replacement. I mean, we're getting old. But your son's playing with us now?
Yep.
He's a great player. So I just think of our history and think, good night. Like a lot of people do our age, how does 30 years fly by?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I just honored to have you. Like I mentioned, you got a lot of education. You got a lot of street smarts, and you got a lot of classroom smarts. You've pursued a lot of education to position yourself in a lot of spaces that now I look at, and it's amazing. Your kingdom, and we're both in that king stage that you write about.
Yeah,
we signed treaties back when we were warriors. But now as kings and having the ability to have influence in different circles, different spaces, to be invited to circles, to be invited to podiums.
Yeah.
You if you could just talk a little bit, like, how do you see all that preparation, playing out as we're gonna move into Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
This is a person that not only have you gone to class about his life, you teach classes in that. So I want to just kind of bring all
Yeah.
that education into this intersection, if we could, for a minute.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks first of all for pursuing my heart as you have all these years, Michael, and the hearts of other men. Man, it's just amazing. I tell everybody you need to have at least one raving fan in your life, and I just feel like you've been that in so many ways. You certainly have. So it's an honor to be on the show. Yeah, my mind races. I was born in 1968. A few months after Dr. King's assassination in Washington D.C. My mother and father were both federal employees. So, being kind of socialized in the North, right at the time, at the height of, well, unfortunately, at his assassination, I feel like it was in my DNA to kind of really recognize that I'm standing on a lot of shoulders. And so, my ancestors were very hopeful for us, our generation, to be able to have access to quality education, and pursue the American dream. And to sit here with you today and to think about what we've experienced over the years in life, I know I'm my ancestors' dreams, right? Like, again, access and opportunity. And fortunately, with enough good coaches and mentors, pastors, women leaders in the church, kind of helped shape and mold a desire in my heart to pursue more, right, outside of my own community per se. Growing up in the black neighborhood, going to predominantly black schools, all through high school. My high school, John Thompson. I often like to
Coach John Thompson.
The legendary Georgetown
Hoyer.
Hoyer. He integrated my high school, but by the time I arrived at my high school, it was all predominantly black. So
What are you, an
1986 alumnus of Archbishop, the great Archbishop Carol Lyons, by the way. I love the lion image that we carry with us here in ministry. And so, a lot of intersections of like recognition of great people and just a pursuit. And early in my life, I kind of got caught with that vision that I could pursue and have courage and go after my heart's desire. Growing up in the black church, a historic 156-year-old black church with a lot of leaders, very much in the what I call in the river of Dr. King and the civil rights leaders, who saw a vision and said, "We've seen the promised land, and we may not get there," he said, "with you, but I've seen it, and I know we need to be working towards it." So I feel like I just got in that river and just continue to learn how to swim through racial hatred, through racial violence, things like that.
Yeah.
And for the most part, come out not bitter and angry at the world, especially the world as it is really ascribed or transcribed in white supremacy, right?
Yeah.
When that's in your face a lot, you're going to choose either two paths. You're going to become really embittered, and Dr. King and those leaders said, hate turns against itself.
Yeah.
So what we will not do is hate our white brothers and our white sisters, even if they despise us as human beings. And that's what when I sit here with you today and you ask me to, share, it's in some ways it feels like a dream because at the time of Dr. King's death, many in the black community were saying this is more of a nightmare for us than any dream that you're having.
We've talked about him over the years. I would say you've reshaped my knowledge and appreciation for him. Yeah, I go back to that white advantage, white privilege. That I looked at him a certain way until you kind of grabbed my face. Look at this way, and some of the things that you just mentioned, and knowing that a hero of yours could become a hero of mine is an interesting idea in that space, and that's what I'm grateful that you've helped me see him, more than a civil rights leader, and that's kind of a historical space. Could you talk a little bit about why you started to a minute ago, so that kind of got this question in my head and heart, why he inspires you so? I want to talk about his life a little bit, but why does Martin Luther King inspire you still,
Yeah.
and is very much a part of your work, of your life, of your faith journey.
Yeah. Wow. I'm trying to figure out how to characterize my vision of King, and I don't know that this will be the best way to do it, but since most of my adult life has been at Duke University, I'll use the example of Coach K. If you play for a legend, right, he's going to teach you some things about basketball.
Yeah.
And a lot of players have learned how to play really well under his tutelage, over his legacy, right? I look at King, for me, has been that in life, right? As you said, for the last 4 years, I've been a teaching assistant. We call them preceptors at the Divinity School at Duke, for a brilliant professor by the name of Patrick Smith. He has a cross appointment at the Divinity School and the School of Medicine. He's incredible background. And we look at King in ways that the general public wouldn't look at in general. His political ideologies, where he got them from, who he was reading. Again, most people know he followed Gandhi's strategy around this love ethic, right? Peaceful, nonviolent, peaceful protest. So he kind of got that playbook by going overseas. So I really watched and observed King and kind of how he lived his life and the stripes he bore as a black man pursuing white friendship. And what most people don't understand is most of us in our community, that's not our interest. We are not, at some point we lost hope that white people really would ever care about whether our lives mattered or not, right? So, what King would say is, America has a conscience and America has a soul, and we're going to redeem it. And I got fascinated with that at an early age. Now, I know I use Coach K. I should probably go to like Muhammad Ali. I go to sports figures, like these great athletes or great thinkers, right? King his mind is a master. Who was he reading? So I've read who he's read, from Walter Rushmbush and the Social Gospel, and who he was influenced by at Morehouse, right? And I've tried in some ways to like, okay, King, you said this is how I respond to hate, right? And then I had a mother who doubled down on all of these things. She was an equal opportunity employment director for the U.S. Navy and Department of Agriculture for her professional career. And her job was to ensure that employers abided by the equal employment laws for blacks to be able to actually interview for jobs at least, right? So she came home every day with that civil rights kind of courage that she had to walk into these federal places and say, hey, you're going to have to interview some of us and you're going to have to give us opportunity, right? Affirmative action and those sorts of things. But again, King, going back to this idea, like his legendary commitment to believing that our country could live up to its ideals. It just fascinated me. It's like, it is something very wrong with a country that has a declaration, has these creeds, but it doesn't apply to some folks. And to think that he had a voice, he had a cadence, how he spoke. I observed all of that. I've watched all his interviews. I've read the whole kind of corpus on King's writings, and all of that has been, and even a recent book is published I was telling you about called King, A Life, which now looks at some of the FBI tapes and how the FBI was seeking to characterize him and to destroy him. But yet he still said, you know what? I have something to live and to die for, and it's worth it. And to me, Michael, I don't know. When you look at, again, when I say great athletes, great coaches, and you see how they mold and shape people, I just was captivated, and I continue to be captivated by that that reality of who he was.
Yeah, I want to take the words fascinated, and captivated, and push in a little more to inspired, because he's inspired you. I mean, there's a part of your life, a huge part of your life that is tangled up in that work. And I think when fascination turns into inspiration, it's something else. Curiosity, exploration, studying, listening. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you're taking up. Not all of a sudden, that's not the right word. Then in a very real way, you start to take up the mantle of Martin Luther King. How would you describe that mantle? You've touched on it a little bit. I'm just going to try to come at some of this in another angle because, again, I think your journey, your expertise on a man that we're trying to honor. Yeah, I mean that's what we're after today. So how would you describe, the inspiration of that man, and therefore that mantle that you have come to believe? This is not just what he's about. Yeah. Or was about. This is what I want to be about. That's to me inspiration.
Yeah. It's the first thing I started to recognize is my formation as a young person is very similar to King's. Okay. Very similar. Raised in the Black church tradition, the American Baptist Church to be specific, and people who know the history of the Baptist Church, and the segregation split between the Southern Church and the Northern churches, and you have these associations of churches, and so my church in Washington D.C., First Baptist Church, I grew up like King. I grew up around people who said, "Son, you are somebody." And we talk about the theology of somebodyness. You are created in the image of God. I don't care what white people say about you. You are a child of God. That was so poured into me that when I saw hatred,
you accepted it.
You couldn't tell me that I wasn't, right? I really believed it. And then that sort of, when I got baptized at 11, again, this giant of a pastoral figure at my church, Frank Tucker, the retired Frank Tucker, I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is... Now, looking back, I didn't have the language, but at 11 years old, I knew a new kingdom was beginning in my life. And so kind of this sea opened up. And again, I'm going through my warrior stage, my boyhood stage, things that now your ministry has helped recognize. Right. And I look back. And I guess football helped because as I was becoming more fierce on the football field, I was becoming more fierce in my sense of faith and my identity, and very much aware that God's providence would prevail in the end, or hopefully in my life, right? And start to honor God. And King at an early age was very precocious. They dressed in suits, and he had a larger than life identity. It's hard to imagine that he was only in his early 20s when they had the first, the bus boycotts. He's just coming off his PhD program. I'm thinking, wow, he's thrust into the center of the storm of racial hatred in the South. And again, I'm marveling at that as I started to realize I'm hearing tapes and recordings, and then I'm starting to watch interviews. I'm thinking, this guy's he's masterful. He can sit across and look at a Klansman or evil in its face and say, you can't touch me. And my life is not my own. I know who the real king is. So his sermons, those things that just kept becoming louder and louder. Wow. And the class, when we started teaching the class at the Divinity School about 4 or 5 years ago, I thought, here you are again, God, up to the good that you want me to be a part of.
Yeah, for your life and for the lives around you,
To be invited to be in the teaching space, right, with mostly white students. Again, Duke being a predominantly white institution, it's a joy for me, because that's what King said. He said, look, I want white folks to be liberated from the construction of supremacy, while I'm deconstructing and building up the Black community from the construction of inferiority. It's dual work. And the only way we can do this, I can't kill you, because that defeats the purpose. So I got to overcome it with love. And to me, to this day, I'm like, man, how do you run those plays when the defense is coming at you that way, and you're calm and cool in the pocket, saying we're still going to love you. Now, you're not going to walk over us. We're going to be militant. We'll show up in the streets, and we're prepared to take your blows. And we believe that our love will out-endure your blows, and you will change. Now, again, the question becomes, did it work? There's a lot, and part of the course looks at, is this foolishly naive that you think you're going to change this country's deep down abiding commitment that Black people are nothing but objects and mules to be used for the building of this nation, and we will do everything in our everything possible to keep it and ensure it that way? And it's like, oh boy, do I believe this?
Mm.
And that's where his faith kicks in. So we see him as this great orator,
Yeah.
but sometimes we don't look at him. This was a deeply faithful man who had feet of clay. He wasn't perfect, but he was perfectly certain that God was a God of liberating those who are captive.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. If I can make that's so much in there. Two things. First, I want to. So when we look back at 1500s, Martin Luther.
Yeah.
Before Martin Luther King, Martin Luther.
Mm-hmm.
We see this reformer.
Yep.
Who is bringing, he's bringing a stick to a gunfight, really.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the constructs and the social spaces of faith at that time, we're talking about Martin Luther.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, he was, this little German monk was the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I made a B in my church history courses in seminary with my biblical counseling degree and all the things I had to take there. But I remember the beautiful parts of that story where Martin Luther is like he got the match. He had the match.
Yeah.
But there was a level of preparedness. There was folks who did want to go all militant.
Yeah.
Against that establishment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just talking about some of the parallels that I hear, feel, and see. And yet there were other characters in that landscape in Europe who were realizing also, this isn't right. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is the gospel.
Yeah.
And so when he brought the match with the 95 thesis, then, whoa, here we go.
Yeah.
And so now to Martin Luther and this Reformation. I mean, that Reformation took a few hundred years and still is pretty fragile.
Yeah.
1500s.
Sure.
You know, and we get our settlers, from England coming into this space to have a new country, America, the revolution, all these things that transpire that have faith at a very, very central part of the conversation, even breaking away from the Church of England for religious freedoms, and yet bringing some of the traditions of what we'll call slavery, servitude, one person owning another person. So looking at Martin Luther King as a reformer, I'm kind of trying to tee that up a little bit.
That's good. His name is a reflection of, that was his parents' recognition when they started calling him Martin Luther.
You gave me some insight, direction, encouragement in this faith community. So where I want to go is to the Birmingham Jail. And let you just share a little bit off your heart of how what those letters, what that was about, and who they were to, and what they, why they were so important to his work.
Yeah, so, I forget how many times King was jailed for, leading these peaceful protests, but they went in Birmingham to seek to change the racial reality in Birmingham, right? A lot of folks, both black and white, felt that King was disturbing the peace, what we call a negative peace, which is, it's not really peace because blacks could not have the opportunity for full flourishing as citizens, right? So, you go to Birmingham and to prepare to negotiate, or you've been through negotiation, but then you say we're gonna boycott some of these establishments that aren't hiring us.
Yeah, it wasn't like he didn't show them the plays that they were going to run.
Right. Right.
It wasn't.
It was always strategy. The SCLC, Southern Leadership Christian Conference that he headed up, always had a strategy, and so King he would write in the letter, while he's in prison, he's writing on what I understand napkins.
So he gets arrested for the protesting.
Right. Not having a permit or something.
And he's literally in jail in Birmingham.
Right.
Okay.
And they typically wouldn't let them have anything to write with, but he was able to get scraps of paper and ended up penning this now famous letter from jail towards these 12 white clergymen who had written a public letter in the newspaper saying, this is not good what you're doing. Why are you, inciting violence? And so King finally said, while he had time, he said, all right, normally I wouldn't respond to my critics because there's too many, but I'm going to do it this time. And I was fascinated by the letter, and I read it once a year. Partly it's part of class too, but, just looking at how he compassionately spoke to his fellow clergy. He saw them as fellow clergy. Yeah. He respected them as such.
Yeah.
And he described how it was disappointing that they would not see that the time was now, not to wait for time. They were like, just be patient, we'll come around, society will come around, but what you're doing is not the way. And so he made a compassionate appeal to them to say, let me help you understand what's going on.
Which is this 95 thesis again. I'm just kind of bringing some ancient history into some not that old.
Right.
Where this is written to the clergy, Martin Luther and Martin Luther King. This is not right. This is what's wrong.
Yeah.
And
he talked about what it was like for them to be silent.
Yeah.
And not to speak up. And he would expect them to actually be marching with them, and they're not. And in many ways, he put them to shame around how you're understanding what's happening in our community, right? In the systems. And he made a point to punctuate that once we go into a city and determine that racism is at work in its commitment to disenfranchise or dehumanize blacks, then we do try to sit down first. We don't immediately come in and start protesting. We actually try to have a conversation, negotiate our terms. Then we go back and pray, and we even fast. And then we determine if you are not sincere in your efforts, then we will get in the street and we will peacefully march and protest until change comes. And we're prepared to take the blows with that, and we train our people. We are trained not to retaliate even. Mm-hmm. So, again, it's a fascinating, interesting dynamic because, again, most of the black community, and I want to honor the other voices that were out there that weren't Christian voices like Malcolm X and others who were raging at this time. Yeah. We're done with this conciliation. And King was, called Uncle Tom, and, white people are never going to come around. All they know is force. And so we're prepared to use force. Yeah. We don't see them as our brothers, and we won't. They're devils, Yeah. And my socialization wouldn't allow me to go that direction. Yeah. I could quietly hate you, though, as a white person. I realized that I think that's a liberation of my faith in Christ, that I will believe that the cross that he bore opened up for me to be able to follow the path of Jesus. So I love Dr. King, and I see him as a saint, and I want my life to reflect that kind of character. But I know that he is pointing to the one who said, I've come for all of you, right? And strip me naked, pierce me in my side. I will still yet say, God is to be glorified, and he is the almighty God. I won't retaliate, or I will resist as much as I can retaliation. So that letter is a powerful letter. I think it recognizes yet again how culture and society can go a certain way and be fully ignorant or complicit in the subjugation of people groups. Mm-hmm. And unless someone stands up and says, wait a minute, this is not right. You and I've talked a lot about William Wilberforce and that whole story, right? I'm captivated by that too.
Yeah, me too.
Why would you take up this cause? Nobody else is. I mean, we always joke, you got to go up against 300 MPs, and it's going to take you 30 years before you end it. Who does that?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to commit my life to 30 years to be under the subjugation of my own health and mental well-being. You know, King, I don't know how he slept at night. He hardly could sleep. I mean, calls in the middle of the night saying, you know, nigga, you better get it right because we're getting ready to come. We're coming for you. His home was bombed multiple times. You know, his family under that.
Yeah.
And so those sort of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they leave you breathless.
This is not 200 or 300 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, and I, you know, I don't want to accuse anyone, and I at the same time I don't want us to be naive because that's not good. Ignorant naivety to the kingdom.
Yeah.
To the evil that is slithering, you know, through the landscape. It's outside the garden.
Yeah.
And race and racism and many other things are just part of a system that God has made and has been infiltrated by an enemy who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Yeah. So this is a huge idea, huge topic, huge exploration, which I love having you as a teammate and a friend in.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say this on Martin Luther King Day. You know, many of my color. I love when we talk about it like that. You know, my color. We don't have too many of your color to even talk about this with, which is a part of even that conversation. And so to get into more conversations, you know, and even that feels like you have to earn those rights. You've got to, that's just not something, you know, we step in and even can ask of.
Yeah.
So it's a fragile thing, and yet it's a powerful thing to pursue those friendships and relationships, and yet it's in that messiness that we have Christ, and we walk and learn how to walk in another person's shoes.
Yeah.
And in another person's story, things that we love at Zoweh.
Yeah.
I don't know that we said this at the beginning, but just for the record, your signature is on the federal forms of Zoweh.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
You signed.
Isn't that crazy?
You are.
I'm implicated in this story.
When we did Zoweh Inc., you signed the line with me. You know, you, me, Jay Stott, bless us, man. What were we thinking? But here we are. So I want to take just a couple minutes to wrap up. And could you give a quick summary of CDR? Yeah. One of the things that you're giving a lot of your heart and time to. One of the things that I think we're finally on the books. You know, our Zoweh team's going to enter this. Because what I hope will happen is there'll be a provoking through this podcast. There'll be some disruption, maybe some invitation to something that takes several more hours to move through. In a weekend, in a couple days that you and friends have created to. So could you talk about your CDR course and what that is, and maybe who knows, maybe Caleb can throw an email out there for info and sure. You know, it's good to be invited to places who are curious about what I want to know more about this, and I can't think of a better man to throw that invitation to. But could you describe a little bit more of how you have put that together and what it is?
Yeah. So thanks for asking. So CDR stands for Christianity Deconstructs Racism, and we put the DE in parenthesis constructs because we know our country found a way during its early foundings and creation of our country to subjugate blacks and African Americans from opportunity. And the church, for the most part, was silent on that, complicit. We actually call it slaveholder religion. They made sure that African Americans, I mean, everything from not being able to read and write, lynchings, just after church, you know, just think of the demonization of that. You get out of church and you go to a lynching, right? So the question is often asked, and was asked of Dr. King. It was asked of his mentor, Howard Thurman. When they would travel overseas, folks in other countries would say, how can you be Christian? We understand that Christians lynch y'all. How do you claim to be a Christian? And that was a serious dilemma for King and others to be able to live that contradiction, right? A Christian faith who was used to implicate Black people as less than human. On the other hand, King was a Baptist minister, and the Black church and its traditions ensured that we knew we were somebody. And while pursuing that, also said, we believe that our white brothers and sisters can be liberated from the construction of slaveholder religion. So the course is aimed at doing that, primarily looking at the history and how Christianity has been complicit, while at the same time seeing how God has stepped in from time to time and has used abolitionists to change that narrative. It's about a 10-hour course. We've done it over weeks where we do 90-minute sessions, or we've done it over 2 days. And the aspiration is, again, to move the heart of men and women to be more active in deconstructing racism and pursuing beloved community. The nuance that I have there is like there's a lot of anti-racist work out there, and it's important. You participated in the Racial Equity Institute training series, and it sort of lays out the landscape, the historical landscape, how racism has worked in history and how it's come up through contemporary times. Yeah. But the question becomes for us, if we're Christians, how do we battle? How do we do battle with the racist realities?
Before we leave the history thing, before we do battles in the just the history education, right? That alone was a stunning piece of spending time, white teachers, Black teachers, just walking through a timeline of history,
right?
And a people group that, I just found myself, I didn't know, like a good documentary, you're just, I didn't know that.
Sure.
Nazi Germany, or some personality that what they lived through or walked through in terms of their life and story. So when that was just a huge favor and a very uncomfortable space to sit through, but yet as one of 100 people in there, about half Black, half white, to just be given an opportunity to look at some headlines and newspapers and statistics and demographics and geographies and historical data. That alone. But now the faith piece.
Right. And because what we were seeing is a lot of folks would go through those series and come out sort of really disillusioned, no hope, and it frustrated. And even to some degree, if a person raised as Black would say, I'm even more angry now, because the load has been even more, disclosed about what I'm up against in society.
Well, you said to me, what it did for you was, I knew it. Mm-hmm. Taking that veil, it was, I knew it. I felt that. And my response was, I didn't know that.
Right.
And you're like, how could you not know that?
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
you don't have to know.
You didn't know it either, but you kind of knew it. And so all of that messiness.
Well, what I want to clarify, when you've said that before, like I said, I knew it. For me, it was in my DNA already. My mother was trained. This is the work she did.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like new information to me. It was more detail around certain things like housing disenfranchisement, voter disenfranchisement, go on down the line, incarceration, laws and things. And so when people say, well, why are the Black people, like the question, like, why are we the ones that seem like that we're always imprisoned or we have the problems? Like, well, look at the construction of white supremacy, how it operates. It's designed to ensure that you, quote, stay in your place. And until you know what Dr. King would say, I'm becoming a transformed nonconformist, which I'm not going to sit around here and like, it's no longer that I'm not a child of God or I'm somehow deficient. And you have to remember, how long does it take to help an enslaved person understand, even once they're liberated, that you're no longer in slavery? And so the work of that is important. So the course is intended to do that work, but primarily directed towards my brothers and sisters like yourself who are, quote, waking up. And again, the enemy comes back, everything. Don't use woke, don't use white supremacy or white privilege because you don't want you to feel bad. And I'm like, well, you know what? If you get in this river, be prepared for some stages of development because it's called deconstruction. One of them is, yeah, you feel a little bit of shame. Yeah, you ought to feel a little humiliated. Guess what? That's what we did. Go through that if you can get through it. And at some point, Jesus will say, like he said to his disciples, y'all going to leave too? Because I know it's getting rough right now. So when you start asking certain questions, and then you as a person raised as white start pursuing them, you might end up like Wilberforce. You might end up saying, you know what, I'm going to be an abolitionist. I'm actually going to do something specific, targeted to change the direction, the course of my whatever sphere I have.
Yeah, your kingdom and its influence. Yeah.
And it's going to be, as a lot of King's contemporaries said, good trouble. We talk about you're going to get into some good trouble. Yeah. And we know that that's what Zoweh is about. I love it. The good that God is up to. And sometimes it means,
good trouble.
The music gets rough.
Yeah.
And so the course is intended to be, we engage in similar ways. As you know, I love movie clips.
Oh, like our encounter weekends. Yeah, we started that a long time ago, man. I remember Patch Adams with a VHS because we did some of these things together early on. And so story,
see things
journey,
differently.
Desire, provoking, disrupting.
Knowing a man. Like you said, when you looked at Bill Russell's life, you're like, oh my God, I just saw him as a basketball player.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? What about Jackie Robinson? Did you know that in 1947, he actually was court-martialed because he refused to give up his seat on the buses like years before Rosa Parks? All these dotted stories.
Yeah.
And the challenge, again, is those who want to push back on us and we don't want to teach our children that. We don't want y'all to know this. And we know where that comes from. The enemy wants you to be ignorant. He wants you to live in shame, which you shouldn't, because now you can say, I'm in solidarity with this brother. I see his life. I've walked in his shoes. I don't feel like I'm not hating myself. I mean, some of us probably do vengefully want to say we want all white people to be shamed and, hate yourself in some way, because that's what you committed to, making sure we hated ourselves. Right. So the battle is fierce, as you know. Yeah. Those kingdoms and realms that you've teed up, I thank you for doing that. Like saying, hey, the kingdom in living color, there's some reality, there's some differences here. What was it like for Keith's father? Well, do you really want to know what it was like for my dad coming out of high school in 55 and saying, I have one choice. Yeah. That's to go fight for my country or to figure out how to survive that racist South where at any moment, a drop of a hat, I could be lynched. What am I going to do? Well, I'm probably going to go fight for my country and live in the contradiction. When I come back home, I'm going to be treated less than a citizen.
Yeah.
And that's the psychology of that. And so we try to do that work in the course and come out whole on the end. Yeah. So I ain't like sometimes you go to certain movies, you leave, you're more angry. So I'm like, man, they've been doing this to us for years and still doing it, as opposed to, okay, the enemy's still coming in similar ways. Yeah. He wants to divide our hearts. You're right. Yeah. He wants me to. You say one coarse thing out of me, and it's like we've known this for 30 years, and you say something wrong, and I'm like immediately like ready to something in my heart is still has not done the work of racial healing. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So I see you as a white peer, white brother, or I have microaggressions throughout the day, treated a certain way, and I see society through this lens. Yeah. But I have to walk away for me to be whole. This is what I'm not doing. I'm not living every day saying, I got treated badly by someone today. That's a race issue. I can't, that narrative is never going to trump like just hateful people, Yeah. And some people have not, encountered a African-American who is in any other way than what's stereotyped. Yeah. Right. And so even living through some of they say, oh, well, he's kind of a passive guy or he can take it. Mm-hmm. Like again, I go back to Jackie Robinson. There was a whole league of Negro baseball players. Oh yeah, they just took a few for like 13 years. They took 16 guys. Yeah, right. But they were like, now some of these guys they ain't coming up in here because the minute you say something, they're gonna be punching you out. And then we know, what can happen from that, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of this slow, quote, integration or efforts to desegregate. But the work of full integration is where, again, when King was assassinated, the next phase was saying, okay, it's one thing I can sit at the counter and get my cup of coffee. Can I own the coffee shop? Are you crazy? What are you talking about? We let you come in the front door.
The stages of,
What more do you want? So when you start pursuing more, I love it, exploring, well, what's the more, Mike? Keith, what else do you want? Well, Michael, look around. I do want to see us in more ownership. I want to see us with more opportunity, more access. But if y'all keep closing doors or secret doors or, then we have what we have. So
I want to, if I can make a close to some of that. I know your heart. I love. So when we say y'all, or we kind of make these general sweeping things, I don't know what all some of the Exploring More friends and allies feel and think.
Yeah.
But the invitation is you. The we and they and all, and you, when you all keep doing this, or when whites, there's such a plural category there that can be, I'm not. So, it can raise this defensiveness that I just want to invite, come back to the table, come back to the conversation, CDR, come to a course. What does it look like to explore this more?
Yeah.
This Martin Luther King Day, not one day a year, but what does it look like to say, I don't want to be naive. I don't want to be, hey, write us on exploring more at Zoweh.org for, if you're upset, if you want to know more, if you have questions, that's all, we're okay.
Yeah.
And I believe all will be well, but we've got some ground to explore with God in this Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yeah.
That I think is inviting us to much, much more. I love you, bro. Appreciate you
Same to you,
sitting in a chair that is, if I was sharing from behind, if we get off camera, I would say sitting in a chair that's just not your favorite chair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet one that you have taken up that mantle and said, I'll sit here for a while.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest. I can share my experience, my story, and invite someone like me, to listen.
Yeah.
And take that in, because our stories matter.
Yeah.
And when we can come to a table and share our stories and not tell each other how to think or feel, but pursue why.
Yeah.
Your child or my child or your mom or my mom, why they think and feel the way they do, you're on good ground.
Amen.
You're on good ground there.
Yeah.
So with that, happy Martin Luther King Day, bro.
Happy Martin Luther King Day, my brother. Thank you. It's been
Yeah.
a blessing. You are a blessing.
Good.
Appreciate you.
Good to be with. So
Amen.
we'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is Zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the life of more by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.